You're still watching TVC Breakfast. We now take you all the way to the center of unity where Tijesu Adeoye is standing by to give us a lot of information with the FCT brief. Tijesu, in Akwana, you're still alone.
Good.
All my love to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Ria. It's good to be here again this beautiful Tuesday morning, and we're warming up to the Christmas season, but here we have the table loaded for you, so sit back, relax, so I will give you what we have for you today. Good morning, this is FCT Brief. We're reaching you live from our Abuja studio this beautiful Tuesday morning. And our focus is on the road to 2026, where we'll be reviewing the gains, the gaps, and the opportunities of the Tinubu administration. Nearly 3 years into the President Bola Tinubu's tenure, Nigeria is navigating a period of significant reforms, tough economic adjustments, and renewed conversation around governance, inclusion, and national direction. From policy shifts and infrastructure development to social impact and economic realities, we examine what has been achieved so far, where challenges remain, and the opportunities that lie ahead as the nation looks towards the next electoral cycle. Joining us on the program is Michael Nwoko. He is the convener of the youth structure for Asiwaju, a platform mobilizing young Nigerians in support of progressive leadership and national development. With a strong focus on youth engagement, political participation, and governance accountability, Michael Nwoko brings valuable insight into how young people are interpreting the administration's performance and shaping the conversation towards 2026. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you. Well, let's begin with the very recent activity of President Bola Tinubu, which is the visit to the National Assembly to present the budget. In his speech, he acknowledged the pains Nigerians have gone through, and he says the worst is over. We're beginning to see results. But some people say that the federal government's understanding of the problem or the pain seems to be more intellectual than emotional. Do you think that their feelings are valid in this regard?
Well, I think it is quite instructive. Are you getting? During the presentation of the 2026 appropriation bill proposal to the joint section of the National Assembly, I had the honor and privilege to be there. And I listened to Mr. President speak with passion. He spoke with a whole lot of zeal. He spoke like a president and commander-in-chief who understands the pulse, the people of Nigeria and knows when it's palpable. Okay, looking at the indices that were clearly spelled out in that budget, is very clear that we are on a sustainable pathway towards economic growth, unprecedented economic growth in this country. Let me just, digress a little bit. You see, the first critical decision that Mr. President took, and that was the point he was being inaugurated as President May 29, 2023, was to take out the fuel subsidy and dismantle the fuel subsidy cabal. This critical decision has helped to reset the economy for unprecedented growth. Because, having taken that decision, what he did was to redirect the funding. Are you getting me? Now, the 3 tiers of government has, disposable income. They are now viable enough to have the resources. These monies that were hitherto, taken out, under the guise of fuel subsidy, arrangements are now being redirected to servicing the economy. And so the 3 tiers of government now have enough resources, to fund capital and recurrent in expenditures. And they have assets. And that is why we are saying the gains. And today, we are now seeing crude oil production output, rising, okay? Today, we are recording over 1.6 million barrels of crude oil production output. This rose from the previous administration, average of about 1 million barrels per day to over 1.6 million barrels per day. That is unprecedented. Now, this has also helped, to guarantee local refining of petroleum products by reviving the Port Harcourt refinery, for instance. The Dangote refinery is almost operating at full capacity utilization. The whole idea is to guarantee petroleum product for domestic consumption and subsequently, guarantee exports, etc. That is what it used to be over the years. wherein we export petroleum products to even neighboring countries, etc. And you'll agree with me that for nearly 3 decades, local refineries in Nigeria never functioned. That is a far cry from what was expected. And so Mr. President, when he came on board, because he is in a hurry to carry out economic reforms, he took this critical decision. Just like as you stated, this is bringing us back now to your analysis, etc. At that time, Nigerians were made to feel the immediate pain, but in the long term, okay, we are beginning now to see the gains, etc. But at that time, he equally took decisions as well in order to cushion the immediate pains that Nigerians were facing at that point in time. And that lent credence to the implementation of the new minimum wage, arrangement to about, 70,000, per se. So Mr. President is very strategic. He understands, he feels the pulse of Nigerians, and he knows when it's palpable. He understands the dynamics of the polity of the country, given the dynamics of this country, given the fact that Nigeria, being a heterogeneous entity, needs a president that understands the dynamics of the political system to be able to address its problems. And that's exactly what we're saying today. Coming back to that budget, you see the figures that were doled out. And of course, he made us understand that these are verifiable facts. Now, the revenue of the country has grown tremendously. H1 2024, we're recording about 9.1 trillion naira. That is unprecedented. This is on account of the gains of the fuel subsidy removal, etc. Now, we just talked about local refining of petroleum products, etc. We're looking at a lot of other programs and policies that Mr. President has been able to initiate and put on the table for the benefit of Nigeria. Social service infrastructure. We're looking at, infrastructural, growth in this country. Are you getting attention to infrastructural development in this country that has never happened before? Mm-hmm. The construction of the Lagos-Calabar, highway is already there. The work is, going on, with, the speed that it deserves, etc. We're looking at construction of the Sokoto-Badagry Expressway. And of course, the second Niger Bridge, link roads, etc. And as I speak to you, over 400 federal highways are under construction in the country. That's to say, however, that Nigeria is under construction.
Right,
looking at the PPP models.
Mr. Michael, what you're saying still brings me back to the intellectual side of things. Nigerians are yet to feel this pulse that you speak of. And if you take a look at the social media as it stands right now, you will see a lot of outrage there. A lot of youths don't really understand where government is at. They hear that, things are getting better, but, they hardly agree with what is being said. They feel it's a scam. Now, you are in charge of the youth, you relate more with the youth population. Where would you say that disparity is?
Yeah, I think, there's a bit of gap. I think we need to communicate more. Like I relate with a lot of, youth groups in the country. Haven't had the honor and privilege, to be the convener, national coordinator of youth structure for Asiwaju, otherwise known as the Asiwaju Boys and Girls Movement, etc. Mm-hmm. You see, we listen to the young, people in this country, and we know what their concerns are, really. But I think there is a communication gap. You see, Mr. President has a lot of programs, policies, and initiatives targeted towards giving the youth of this country a new lease of life. But the point is that most of these youths do not really understand what these programs are all about. They need really to understand. We need more of communication. Now, looking at these programs and policies, because what we do basically is to help to coordinate, organize, and mobilize young Nigerians to key into the programs, policies, and initiatives, of Mr. President. And of course, at the same time, as having this, general acceptability of the President Bola-led administration with a view to mobilizing preponderance of young Nigerians to supporting Mr. President and all other candidates of the APC in the next elections. But again, we have a lot of job to do. Now, let's look at these programs and initiatives. We have the LEAP program, that's the Labor, Employment and Empowerment Program, targeted at creating jobs for over 2.5 million youths in this country. How many youths have got to know about this? Are you getting me? We equally have the student loan, program, for instance, that's the NELFund program. As I speak to, over 300,000, students have accessed, these funds. We have the NIA, a program that recently have been launched with a view to creating more employers of labor amongst, the young, population of Nigerians. The Mr. President wants the young people to now begin to tinker as to how to become employers of labor and not employees of labor. That's the whole idea. But giving these laudable policies, etc., targeted at giving Nigerian youth a new lease of life, how many of these youths really have come to understand? So we are totally determined towards bridging this gap. We want Nigerian youth actually to come on board. You see, the reason why over the years there's been a lot of resentment on the part of Nigerian youth and even voter apathy, from the voting pattern in the last election and the results of the elections, you agree with me that there was a lot of, voting apathy, particularly amongst the Nigerian youth, because the greater, proportion of the voting population really are the young Nigerians. If you look at the semantics, you'll agree with me that 70% of Nigerian population really are under the age of 30, therefore making Nigeria one of the world's most youthful nation. That is a serviceable population with the capacity to service the nation and enhance productivity. And however, this population now gives this country the opportunity, significant opportunity for economic growth. It can also be used the other way around. Significant opportunity for economic growth where there is investment in education, skills, and job creation. If there's a gap, there's a lacuna in these three pillars I've just mentioned, then there is an indication that it will not be used the other way. It now begins. Because youth obviously must guarantee 3 square meters on their table. A young Nigerian, for instance, who have gone through the 4 walls of the university, etc., with the hope that by the time he leaves school, he will be gainfully employed. And now he leaves the university. And what he's saying is a far cry from what is expected. The worst that can happen to a man is when you throw his hope away. And the man resorts to crime, etc. We're talking about the state of insecurity in this country today. The point is that if the youth are constructively engaged, you will have succeeded in addressing one fundamental issue, and that is to address the state of insecurity. It's actually the youth population that are involved in crime, etc. When you engage them constructively, a young Nigerian who is constructively engaged, goes to work in the morning, returns in the evening, will not have time to plan crime. So that's the point. You see, there's no rocket science. These things must be followed systematically and methodically in order to ensure that we achieve maximum and comparative outcomes.
All right. You spoke about a communication gap in this regard, because if government is doing one thing and the people don't understand what the government is doing, then you have this resentment that we see. So who should be held responsible in this regard? Should we be talking about the NOA, or should we be talking about the Minister of Information? These are the officers in charge of bridging the gap between government and the people. Should they be held accountable for this? I agree.
Yes, the government order is largely involved, the lead as well. You see, the point is that for there to be good leadership, first there must be good followership. Are you getting me? So it is the responsibility of everybody, not necessarily the government order. Just like as we are coming on board, for instance, I wasn't appointed by the government order. Are you getting to be the convener or coordinator of the youth structure? It's because of the passion. It's driven by passion that I have for young people, etc. Having to, mentor young people and all that in order for them to think of, succeeding in life, etc. and all that. So we all hold this country that responsibility. It is an obligation. For those of us who are enlightened Nigerians who are able to monitor the, progress, recorded by the government order under the President Tinubu-led administration, we owe this nation a duty to communicate effectively. Are you getting to different target population and audience as to what the government order is doing? So, in as much as the government order, it's charged with the responsibility to do that. You talked about agencies like the NOA, the Ministry of Information, etc. Yes, they are doing their best, but a lot more needs to be done. We, at our own level, we probably need to do a lot more. So everybody must be involved, because it takes good followership to bring about good leadership. Are you getting what I'm saying? So, however, what we are doing right now is to using a data-driven system to have a pool, of young Nigerians who really are enlightened, young Nigerians with the determination and zeal to be part of the national rebate process under the President Tinubu-led administration. That is what we are doing currently. We have millions of young Nigerians, on the pool already. The whole idea is for us to track information as to what the government order has on the table for young Nigerians. We'll bring them to the fore. We'll let them know what these policies are, how they can key in effectively and also benefit. That is the whole idea. If that comes to the fore, you now have a situation whereby the youth will now begin to have a reorientation, a rethinking of the entire, process. If you go to the average youth in the streets, say, forget about presidents, forget about government, they have failed us. But they don't really understand what is going on. So we need to communicate effectively. We need to get them to key into these programs, policies, and initiatives. And ultimately, if this comes to the fore, given the barrage of these programs and initiatives, being brought to the fore by the President Tinubu-led administration, I have a firm belief that preponderance of Nigerian youths obviously would embrace this administration, and of course they will now be thinking of contributing their own quota by coming out en masse. Voter party will no longer be there. They now want to be part and parcel of this government system. They want to now be part of the electoral process, because if you meet an average youth now who really have not benefited, are you getting, from have not been able to feel the impact of the government order, you are not telling them to come and vote for your candidate in the election. They'll just look at you, they just smile and walk away, because the interest is not there. But this is really what we shouldn't be expecting. We want a situation whereby this, because the truth of the matter is that if you build a youth, you build a nation. Okay. You destroy a youth, you destroy a nation. Some of my youth people, in the course of interaction, will tell you that it's not destroy the youth, it's scatter the youth, it's scatter the nation. That kind of thing. Because these are young people. We must be able to now, the members, those who are in the government order today, whom have risen through the ranks over the years and already up there, should begin now to have succession plan. It's just that in this part of the world, don't have, effective succession plan. You should think of how to, hand over to the younger generation. And how do you hand over to them? You cannot do that in isolation. You cannot do that in abstract. You need to let them know what is happening. You need to engage them from time to time. You need to ensure that they have this semblance or sense of belonging, so that they can also go out there and speak authoritatively. It's not just you speaking now. Let them now speak authoritatively. Let them now begin to give testimonies as to what they have benefited from the government order. That is the only way you're able to track the progress and conduct appraisal of your achievement as a government. It's not just when you go out there to speak.
All right. Let's talk security, which is one of the major challenges confronting Nigerians as we speak. We heard the president during the budget presentation speak quite firmly against insecurity, the perpetrators, and also their sponsors. It's not the first time we're hearing government coming out boldly to, challenge this insecurity. But people are saying, is it enough? Word of mouth. How about backing it up with action?
I can state without fear of contradiction that Mr. President is very serious with the fight and the strategy that he has deployed towards fighting insecurity in the country. When he gave a presidential directive that police officers attached to VIPs be withdrawn, they thought he was joking. They thought it was business as usual. But we are seeing the effect and the impact. Over the years, previous administration, previous governments have made that pronunciation, but they never enforced it. But look at the enforcement. You see, Mr. President is very strategic, he's very serious. He doesn't just make, statements, he acts it. Today, police officers attached to VIPs have been withdrawn. I saw in the National Assembly where I work, a task force that was set up by the IGP. They were coming, looking out for police officers attached to VIPs, and they were arresting them. For the first time, we saw police officers arrest police officers. So they will not ask you questions. In fact, what they have even said now is that it goes beyond even the officers who are running foul of these directives, but their supervisors will also be brought to book. They will check. If they see you attached to a VIP, still going about with the VIP, they will now go and find out who your supervisor is. And that supervisor will, also suffer the penalty. So today, you are seeing VIPs move around without police officers. And Mr. President have also made alternative arrangement by saying that civil defense officers should be trained effectively to do the job of VIP protection, and of course review DSS officials, etc. That's what we are seeing today. And they are being debriefed and being trained. Now they are recruiting more officers to, fill in the gap, while they are also recruiting more police officers to police the society. The actual intent and purpose of having police in a society is to police the society, not to police individuals. What we have seen over the years is shifting protection to individuals and therefore leaving the society porous to crime. And so there's nobody to police the society. And so the crime is not even getting, in fact, it will even get to a point in time that even the police officers attached to the VIPs will become overwhelmed. by the time we leave the society to become porous to crime and insecurity. But they need to go out there. They need to go to the areas of threats. They need to go to the, lights, areas of spotlights that have been identified as major security threats to secure us and not just securing the VIPs. And that's why we are getting results today. And Mr. President also made it very clear that thousands of terrorists have been eliminated. You saw the recent statement that he released, declaring bandits as terrorists, members of terrorist organization, kidnappers, etc., and all that, with severe penalty and punitive, arrangement to bring all of them to book. You see, there's no rocket science and there's no magic. But I can tell you that with this strategy that Mr. President has deployed, I can tell you that in the coming months, in the coming years, that this country will enjoy the kind of peace that it has never really enjoyed, for many years now. Because, you see, this is what it used to be. I remember in the 90s, you'll agree with me, for those of us who are millennials, in the 90s, we grew up, we saw, my dad worked with Michelin, for instance. So most times we go with him, we see those expatriates, etc., from Europe, the English persons, those from Romania, those from Belgium, etc., expatriates who occupy the top echelon of these organizations. They just go into their vehicle and they drive even through, difficult terrains without police protection. VIPs were not moving with police in the early 90s down to the mid-90s. So the fundamental question is this: what has gone wrong? And at what point did we get it wrong? At that time, you drive into the petrol station, you get fuel at a conservative rate. You go to Ghana, for instance, you see petroleum products being shipped from Nigeria. You go to other neighboring nations, petroleum products being shipped from Nigeria. What has gone wrong? You open your tap, at that time you see water from water board. You turn on the light, you see light. So what has actually gone wrong? And so this is actually what Mr. President is totally determined towards, fixing. He has taken critical decisions from day one he was inaugurated into office as Mr. President to reset the economy in order to achieve maximum and comparative outcomes.
Very quickly, because of our time, let's move to 2026. And one issue that seems to be dominating the public discussion right now is the tax. A lot of people, this has raised a lot of distrust. This has raised a lot of controversy among the public. There's the accusation, or is it some people are alleging that what was passed by the National Assembly is different from what was signed by the presidency, and also the presidency has come out to deny that. But I would like to know, why is there so much distrust concerning this tax laws?
Like I said, there needs to be proper communication. I've taken time to study that tax, bill, etc. It went through the legislative process at the National Assembly. It is not possible that Mr. President will sign a different bill, that was, passed, because it went through the methodological, process, at the National Assembly, first reading, second reading, third reading, before eventually it was sent to Mr. President for assent. So it's not possible that Mr. President signs a different thing. You also agree that it came via an executive bill. You get what I'm saying? So the methodical process was followed at the National Assembly, and of course it's been signed into law. Over the years, many business persons have been running foul, of the tax, laws. To even pay tax is a problem. You see, for those of us who have traveled around the world, it's not possible for you to evade tax anywhere. In fact, tax evasion is a crime punishable by law, because that is where government needs to have disposable income to be able to give back to the society, guarantee, funding of capital and recurrent expenditures, etc. So you shouldn't run far of the law. But with this, I also understand, during the course of interacting with a lot of Nigerians who really understand what the tax, law is all about, have come to really accept it, really, as what is, really the best, for the nation at this point in time, especially now that we're on a trajectory towards economic prosperity, and growth under the President Bola, led administration. So everyone, if you are in business, private business, you are a civil servant, etc., you must be able to give what belongs to the society, what belongs to the government, so that government will have its, enhanced, ability and capacity to be able to give back to society. That's the whole idea. But I think we need to communicate. Like I said, we need to communicate more. Mr. President has a lot on the table. He's in a hurry to carry out, fundamental, and bold economic reforms, that can bring about, melodramatic changes in this country. But I think we need to communicate more. There's a lot. if we continue to look at some of these programs and initiatives, etc., we'll not live here today. The man is loaded with ideas, but we need to communicate more. We need to reach out to target population and audience. The one that affects the youth, we need to reach out to the youth. We need to let them understand what Mr. President is actually doing to better their lot. The social initiatives meant for women, we need to reach out to women group, letting them understand what the government order has in store for them, etc., so that they can cane effectively. You know, all other programs like infrastructure, etc. Like if you ask Nigerians, how many of you know about the PPP models enacted by Mr. President? That's the public-private sector, initiative, in the area of medical projects and hydropower, in order to guarantee absolute reliable power. How many Nigerians know about it? You just hear these things, you read this, but we need to be able to break these things down to the people so that they will really understand. So there's a lot going on in this country. But again, we need to bridge the gap.
Speaking about a lot, when people think development, especially at the grassroots, they always look towards the center, which is the federal government. A lot of attention is not really paid to the state governors, which, if we look at it right now, federal allocation has increased to the state government, but we hardly see any development going on in states and in rural communities. How would you say state governors should be held accountable in this regard?
Yeah, Mr. President has made it very clear that the state governor should water the ground, a little bit. But what he meant is to actually put the governors on the spotlight in view of, the resources that is now available at their disposal by reason of the fuel subsidy removal regime. So there's a lot, of resources now accrued to the 3 tiers of government. And so the governors really need to do a lot more. I know that some of these governors are doing a lot. We can mention a lot of states here where we are seeing things, we are reading things, etc. Like Abia, of course, my state governor is also doing a whole lot. Delta state governor, etc. in the area of infrastructure, human capital development, and all that. You see, the essence of governance is to use the instrument of governance to better the lots of the people. When you have the resources at your disposal, deploy it accordingly so as to give the people a new lease of life. That's the whole idea. So governors really need to do a lot. Not only the governors, even the local government chairman, they need to do a lot as well. Because, you see, governance is local. Politics is local. Everyone must do their best. If you travel, for those of us who have traveled around the world, you travel to UK, you see homes. Federal government hardly will have business with building local homes. It's not possible in the UK. They are built by the local authorities. In the US, it's the same thing. So, you see, we need to have a well-coordinated and harmonized developmental pattern across the 3 tiers of government, so that when federal government is doing its best, state is collaborating, local government is collaborating, then we'll have, a very prosperous society. All right. Very quickly, before I let you go, now that the 2026 budget has been presented to the National Assembly, of course, we're going to see a scrutiny of that public document. But there's one thing that the president said, which is giving a matching order to, the Minister of Finance, the coordinating Minister of the Economy, and also the Minister of Budget and National Planning. And the DG Budget Office. And DG Budget Office. Yes. Implementation seems to be quite an issue when it comes to budget. And we also saw that the president said this time around we're going to be streamlining the budget, and we are not going to be having that multiple running budget as we have it now. Precisely. Do you think this is achievable? Yes, it is doable. Yes, we had implementation for 2024 was much more better than 2025 because I think they tracked a lot of projects that are not in line with the priority areas. Mr. President has carefully articulated priority areas under the Renew Hope agenda, such as infrastructure, power. They are paying less attention to empowerment because people have been doing a lot of empowerment programs, etc. They want programs that can really be that are more sustainable and highly impactful to the people. And they're in the area of infrastructure, power, through mini grid, projects, etc. Construction of classroom blocks, etc. Markets and all that. These are things that has direct impact, on the people. So. What Mr. President is saying is that this budget implementation, yes, in as much as implementation is key, that's why he gave that directive to the Minister of Finance, coordinating Minister of the Economy, Minister of Budget, National Planning, then DG Budget Office to ensure compliance and implementation of the 2026 budget, etc. He also further directed that all budget liabilities that is for 2024 and 2025, must be clear between now and March. So that, however, by April, the 2026 budget cannot take effect. They want to ensure that these budgets really are implemented in line with the priority areas, clearly spelled out under the Renew Hope initiative. That's the whole idea. They don't want multiple budgets to be running, etc. and all that. So what Mr. President wants is to have a budget that will be implemented for the good of the people. The Renew Hope initiative is carefully thought out, to impact positively on the people. And he also wants it to trickle down, to the rural dwellers. That's the whole idea. So that in all the wards, there's virtually no ward that you can visit in this country that you will not feel the impact of the Renew Hope agenda. That's the whole idea.
All right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, Mr.
Really?
Michael Owoko, but we had a lot. It was a robust conversation, I must say. And I will say thank you so much. I know indeed that Nigerians will be looking forward to a better 2026, and hopefully all these gaps are being closed.
Precisely.
And they feel relief to their pains. Thank you so much for your time.
Precisely. Thank you so much. I didn't know that we're run out of time because I was thinking we have just started.
No. Thank you so much for sticking with us throughout this 30 minutes. We'll now hand you over to Lagos, where Ria and the rest of the team are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
All right. Thank you so much, TJ. So I sure wish you guys had more time over there. But thank you. Fantastic interview there. Thank you.